Welcome back. I hope you had a great lunch break or just a thinking pause or networking with others here on site or online, because as I know, we are all hybrid today. So you know you can ask your questions into the chat, in the live session, and actually in the chat, or the question columns that you have when you are registered on Swapcard, right? So you know you can be part of this. And sometimes we will also, as you saw it in the last session, have a look in the room if there are some questions from people live, like real people. So again, I'm AC Coppens, and I'm continuing to be the host for today. And we are going with the Metoo movement of the music industry. We have a panel which will be headed by Kikelomo. I mean, she's an acclaimed DJ, presenter, curator, host, and also the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group of the Association of Electronic Music. So this is really great. And she will lead the discussion together with Phillips, the founder and creative director of Conceptual, Lina Stotz, who is the section manager, domestic and sexual violence at Terre des Femmes. We will have Rebekah, who is a DJ, producer, and activist for the music campaign, and Pierre, Sainz, I say it in French, general manager, founder, and talent and agent of the Reprise Talent Agency. Let's speak French now, right? No, okay. So let's have this very super, really important talk to discuss sexual harassment and gender bias in the music industry. It is not a topic to make fun of, so let's go focus on this and bring great minds together. Enjoy and make the most of it. See you later.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this session with Most Wanted Music on the Metoo Movement, as you just got introduced to. My name is Kikelomo. I'm going to be your host for today, and I think this topic is obviously quite a sensitive one. The Metoo Movement, if you're not familiar with, has been around since around 2006. It's a global movement against sexual harassment and sexual crime allegations throughout all sorts of industries. But today we're here to talk about specifically the movement in Metoo in dance music. We've seen a lot of conversations happening in the press, in communities, online, offline, and today we wanted to bring together a lot of important minds from various aspects of making spaces safe and safer, to really to put together some ideals and some thoughts on how we can make the progression of the dance music industry even safer for the partygoers. So I welcome with me a fantastic panel of industry experts, Rebekah, Lina, Chris, and Pierre. And I guess I'm just gonna maybe put together some general questions first, and then maybe direct some specific questions to our panelists. So yeah, thank you all for joining us today. I guess maybe to start with, I just want to talk about looking at commonalities and education first. And maybe I would start with Rebekah, since you are obviously leading a campaign against this topic. And maybe I want to ask you what you think, or how common you think harassment and assault is in the industry, and generally what you think can be done around education to make sure that people understand how common this is.
I think this is a very, very common issue, and the telltale signs for me is obviously it's happened to me numerous times. Most of the females in the industry who I speak to, it's happened to them numerous times, and that's whether it's like just mild sexist comments, overhearing sexist talk from generally industry guys. And really up to, full-on rape and assault. So I know that it is common, and it's common because it's really such an unregulated industry. We don't have any regulations around this. There's no HR department where you can report it. And what I notice the most is that we have been in a very highly sexualized industry. So women get rewarded for their sexuality over their music. I know it's changing a lot now, which is amazing, but there is definitely some areas that we really need to look at. Education-wise, yeah, it's a bit of a hard topic because the industry is set across the whole of the world. We communicate in many, many different languages. Each country has its own, set of laws around assault and rape and harassment. So it's almost like, how do you educate a whole industry, like a global industry? What I found is that we just have to start with the conversation. We have to raise awareness first. We have to get people to believe that there is a problem happening. And I think by doing this, like, the more women that have come forward about their stories, the more freely that we can speak about it, means that there will be change, because people are just not going to deny that it's happening anymore. So as our campaign, we work with different initiatives that offer the educational part, which is basically, it's around consent predominantly. What is consent? What does that look like? You know, and how does that translate onto the dance floor or in the workplace? So that's the main thing that you have to focus on. And then personally, from the studies that I've read up on, it's trying to get the whole of the community to take responsibility. And then if we're all responsible, then we can all be educated pretty well. So I do have solutions, there's quite a few, but it's really about creating some empathy for the victims, awareness, empathy, and then personal responsibility. And that's from promoters to DJs to agents to managers to basically everybody. And then the clubbers, you know, we're a community. And I think once we get that ideology of being one, then I think this will become easier.
Fantastic. And I maybe want to pass the question to Lina, because we've just heard about some of the inspirations and motivations behind For the Music campaign. And Lina, you're involved with the Unhate Women campaign. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and kind of also the connection it has to the Deutsch rap scene and how that's evolved?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Rebekah said. It's really important to speak about the issues of sexism in all walks of life, and also in the music industry. And we did that with our campaign Unhate Women, which we started in 2019. The campaign is basically centered around a video which shows 5 women reading out lyrics from German rap songs by some of the most popular German rappers. And these lyrics are very blatantly sexist. They trivialize sexual assault. They basically negate consent, all that type of thing. And it's really impactful how in this video women read out these lyrics written about them without the beats in the background. It's really quite striking, and it gets the point across that language does matter, because these words are so powerful and so misogynistic and sexist and all those kinds of things. And that's what we did with our campaign Unhate Women. And it sparked a big debate online and offline. It was a topic of talk shows, and some of the rappers featured in the video also threatened women who online spoke out in favor of the campaign. So it really took an unfortunate turn of events in that case, but we were really happy with the general discussion of the topic, which is just really important. And a similar thing happened with the hashtag Deutsch Rap Metoo, which you asked about, which started here in Germany in the summer. And it started with an influencer, Nika Irani, speaking out about sexual assault she experienced by the rapper Samra. And she basically just shared her story online, and it sparked a lot of backlash, but also a lot of support from the community, and this hashtag started, and a lot of women shared their stories, which I find really admirable. It's really brave to share your story online and speak out about what you experienced. And a lot more people should be comfortable to do that. But for us as a women's rights organization, we find that it should also be the case that women feel comfortable to speak out, not only to family, to friends, or on their social platform, but also to police and authorities. That's really the next step where this should all lead to.
Great, thank you. And I guess kind of bringing in this theme of raising awareness, prompting important conversations to make sure that it's in the right eyes and that people are working towards solutions. I'd like to jump to you, Chris, because you're running a party that is, I guess, legendary in Berlin, but also legendary in the sense that it's really promoting a sex-positive and sex-safe environment. And I'd love to ask you what tools and policies that Pornceptual has in place to ensure that guests attending the event are as safe as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, just start like Pornceptual is a sex-positive party. And I think the idea of being sex-positive is that you go to an event where sex can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. So that means that the event is more inviting for the people that have never been to this kind of event, and they have this more inviting and open experience. And of course, I mean, part of what we do is to educate people and to teach people how to behave in this context. So we have different policies. I think this starts with like the communication before the event, like we send an email to all the ticket holders and we explain about the consent rules. We also explain that we have this like ask, don't touch policy, which I think is like very important. And then of course, I mean, we have a strict policy that is about like, kind of like creating the event in a way that the only people that enter are the people that understand the rules and they're willing to participate somehow. And then once they're inside, we also work with the awareness team that is also very important for the concept because they're not there to polish the guests, they're there to take care of the guests. But of course, I mean, if something happens, they're also available.
Okay, thank you. And I guess coming on to Pierre, because we've heard from the perspective of enabling guests and event attenders to feel safe and having policies around that. Pierre, I would love to have your perspective from the artist and talent perspective about how you think artists and agencies can leverage their power to make spaces safer as well.
I think it's not like about just like about power question, but maybe in the first place would be like to how we can act all together with the promoter, the artist, the agencies. I'm also working with Rebekah for the Metoo Music campaign, and there with a few points that we have been highlighting. One of them is like to start by identifying, like in a venue, where are the weakness of a venue, where are the place or the situation that could be like less safe in a venue. This could be made by speaking with the promoter to help, like maybe it's like on the dance floor, it's like the toilets area, it's like the backstage area, whatever. And also maybe having tools in place to collect direct feedbacks from the partygoers onto the dancers. The next one will be like to, after identify, be like to inform, to have like flyers or posters dispatched all across the venue to inform about sexual harassment, and also to inform what is in place in the venue against it, and to make the venue a safest place. And I think what will be important to an artist's point of view is also to use all the leverage they have now on social media, on all the reach they have now on social media, to also go towards this direction and inform people and other people following them about sexual awareness. And I think that's what I think.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, we've heard about solutions from everything from campaigns to raising awareness, to implementing door policies, to better collaboration between artists, agencies, and venues. I'd like to open the questions up to everyone. What do you think, or in your experiences, what have been your biggest challenges with the various tools that you've mentioned so far in kind of like implementing solutions that kind of tackle this problem?
I think for the venues and for the promoter, it's like to be a bit patient, because that is like we're talking about big changes, and like things like all big changes, we need like sometimes and need to be like step by step, especially after like COVID, after everything will happen. I think because if you want to implement like the security also on the venue, it means that the people, the promoter, they will have to have the staff train all the staff, not only the people at the entrance, but also like from the bar for all the staff. This costs money, I think this is like we just need like to have time, because those people that we need to invest money for this. And I think the easiest way how to start is like maybe to start with the bigger festivals or bigger events that start acting this way. On the smaller event, we'll see that this is happening and maybe just following the move. But I think this is a long, really long process, and we just need to have some patience for the people like fighting against it to have the first result.
Agreed. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying. I think like finding the right venue and also training the staff in a way is quite challenging, just like this relationship with clubs. So that's why I think one of the biggest issues is the security team as well. It's really hard to find like a well-trained, especially in the context of organizing like career events. And that's why, as I mentioned before, the awareness is so important, because we build an awareness team and they are like part of our community. So there are people that are more trained and more prepared to deal with the guests, instead of like the security team that we usually just meet them on the night, so we don't have a relationship with them. So that's really challenging for sure.
Great.
Yeah, for us, I think the biggest challenge in our work, which is to raise awareness around topics concerning women, is the very common response of discrediting women who speak out about the issues they face. And that's a real challenge, and sometimes can even get dangerous, as we saw with the example I mentioned of women online receiving actual threats because they spoke out against sexism in the German rap scene. So I would say that's the biggest challenge we face, and also kind of emblematic of a lot of issues around the topic in general, concerning victim blaming and all those types of things. Women, alleging that women just seek fame if they speak out against assault by musicians. So I think that's for us a major issue.
Okay, and maybe just coming on to this topic of online abuse, I think we're definitely moving into an age where we're seeing the space of online being almost as important as what happens offline, particularly in terms of the telling of stories, being used as a powerful tool to kind of, as you said, share and improve education and awareness, but also on the flip side, opening up new alleyways for other forms of harassment and abuse. So I maybe want to open up again to everyone to hear your thoughts on what changes you would like to see, either on a policy level for the platforms, but also on an individual level to kind of make online spaces more safe and more comfortable, so that people also feel good with sharing their stories. It's a tough one.
I think we're going to really struggle to get the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the Twitters to give us any help, to be honest. I think if they can't remove racism around football, from the big football corporations, I think we're going to really struggle. They're going to look at us and laugh. So that means, again, we have to take responsibility, and we need to educate people again on what's acceptable, what's not, and also use the community, and the numbers of people. If you see a comment online that's abusive to a woman who you're following, you don't even need to debate it. You just report it straight away. The thing is, when people are abusing you online, is they want to be heard. They're very small people in their small corners wanting attention. So it's really easy then for the more people that report it, the quicker these people are going to get blocked and it's going to go away. And I think if we do that as a community and we have that responsibility, which we all are responsible for this stuff, then I think we can kind of moderate it ourselves. And also, we've just got to change, I think, this old school mentality thinking of all women in the industry are groupies. That is such a big problem. There was a massive documentary that came out around the rock music industry, which highlights everything about, the groupies. And I think we're still in this kind of groupie mentality. It's been there from day one, and it's just how do we move forward into the next era where we don't have groupies, or not that we don't have them, but they're not tarnishing all women with the same brush, which is what most of the abuse that I've come across around when speaking out, or other women are speaking out about their experiences. So, yeah, I I think that's it.
Okay, and I feel like also one of the things that kind of ties into that is representation, right? So I think a lot of what the media, how media portrays a lot of the people that have come forward, and as you said, tarnishing kind of some of their names and trying to discredit some of their allegations, comes down to representation. I think a lot of the solutions that I've seen in creating safer spaces ensure that there's representation across all spectrums in every element of the production of an event, whether that's from sound technicians to lighting technicians, to kind of also dispel against this notion of how women working in our industry are perceived to be. So I definitely agree there. And I think one of the things that was also interesting that you mentioned is kind of like this, obviously platforms like Facebook and Instagram and the Twitters and all that, as you say, there's limitations and also unwillingness to a certain extent, I would say, to kind of invest in tools to create these safer spaces, but relying more so on communities and self-regulation. So I'd also be interested to know if anyone on the panel has ever seen really great examples of communities self-regulating and holding each other accountable in a way. But then also maybe contrasting it with this notion of cancel culture, which is obviously very rife. So yeah, does anyone have any good examples of community policies?
Not really, but kind of in that direction. I could just mention a little bit about an educational campaign that we run. Yeah, it's quite similar to what Rebekah spoke about. So I think for self-regulation, it's really important to equip young people who are online with the tools to play a part and make their social media more safe, because the platforms are not doing it, so I guess the people using it should do it. And we run this educational campaign in schools, teaching children how to report certain contents, but also how to respond and kind of spark a debate and engage with haters and trolls. And I think that's probably at the moment the best way to go about it. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not aware of a community doing it amazingly and self-regulating perfectly.
Okay, anyone else?
I mean, from my own experience, like whenever I get a really negative comment, usually 2 or 3 people will jump in and start having the conversation with the person, and then usually at some point they realise that they're not going to win, so it's not worth it. And then, it's also having the debate on there, you know, I leave my comments up mostly for people to read, like I do believe in freedom of speech as well. So, but obviously if it's just full on, you know, abuse, then I will delete it. So people do, you know, your followers are usually got your back. So, you know, there is that kind of like cynicism sometimes with people that, you know, they like to see famous people fall and whatnot. But I feel like the dance music industry is slightly more personal. You know, they're not pop stars, DJs, you know, so it's kind of somewhere in between. So your followers generally will support you. And I think, yeah, that's generally my experience. But for me personally, it took me a long time. Like, I've heard everything, you know, like I've had, like, I don't think anyone could say anything worse to me now because all the bad things have been said. So for me, I've kind of moved upwards in my thinking and what really affects me. But I know a lot of newcomers, you know, they've still got to go through that. And then I think to myself, well, why should that have to be, again, another rite of passage, what they have to endure, what women have to endure, just to be in this industry, and it shouldn't be there in the first place. But yeah, that's just really my experiences.
Okay. And I think what's important here is that you mentioned earlier that the club and dance music space is unregulated, but I think also what people sometimes forget is that it is a workplace. It's a workplace for many people, whether that's technicians, whether that's artists or performers, and there is this separation because sometimes it can be quite informal. But I'd like to ask if anyone has any thoughts on the usage of more formal policies that sometimes take place in more traditional workspaces. For example, codes of conduct or kind of zero tolerance policies. how you think they could be applied to kind of clubs and campaigns and music scenes in general to also improve spaces.
I think the only way to make the big venues and promoter starting having like really working on the zero policy and really starting doing changes is then having like the bigger artists using their powers. For this needs to have like a collective of bigger artists. That's why Rebekah is trying to do also with a campaign and trying to be together and trying to put some pressure, and this could be also by clause to be added in the contract from the artists, for example. Could be like a few points that will not all need to be fulfilled, but maybe like to start like 3 out of 6, 3 out of 10, whatever. But just like to having like, if it really needs to be to that point, to having like a sort of pressure to be put on promoters, and then if they want to book like the really big artist, and if they have this in the contract, they have no choices but to start making changes.
Great. Any other thoughts?
I have an idea. I mean, you're with the AFEM, which is the Association for Electronic Music, and there is a membership that like venues have to access, or they access. So it could just be one requirement that they have to have a code of conduct. You could be based on the code of conduct, that's sort of the example one that AFEM already have, and they can kind of make it their own, but membership requirement has to have that in place. And then there needs to be HR. And I think if venues and promoters just see that it's, you know, it's a health and safety issue, and then if you slowly turn it around into a health and safety issue, it's the same thing as like dealing with drug abuse or, you know, overdoses, and, you know, it's just one part of a health and safety issue, then I think that might make more sense. And then also if the club or the venue, the promoter fails, then there should be, or there could be, a reporting system via AFEM, which would then kind of like be a sort of a HR, an even higher HR, and then AFEM can then go back and say that you've got problems or some issues, you know, where's the failures happening, and then that would also then protect the workers as well from the like working in these places. So I think it has to be, we have to look at the this side of it. It's super important because a lot of abuse goes on in the workplace. You know, it's on the dance floor, it's in the workplace, and, you know, there's going to be some statistics coming soon which is really going to show how much of this stuff is going on. So it is part of it, and it is something that definitely needs to be looked at. I mean, how do you think about like that idea?
I think the usage, that is something that is fundamentally lacking in our industry, is having kind of oversight bodies or regulatory, not even if it's not regulation, but kind of third-party institutions that people feel comfortable to reach out to, that have a plan of action to take care of some of the allegations and also hold people accountable, that will follow through on allegations. So I definitely agree that this is something that the whole music industry should be invested in, particularly, as you say, as a health and safety issue, not necessarily just as a something to look good at and topical, but actually investing in making sure that these spaces are safe for the people that they're employing across all of the board. And I think, kind of coming on to that, I know that Conceptual has a series of health and safety policies on board to make spaces feel safe. I'd be interested to know what Conceptual does in terms of health and safety for guest goers.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I mentioned before, I think like the awareness team is a very important part of this, because they're not only dealing with harassment cases, but also they're very well trained for like harm reduction. And I think the idea of harm reduction is really important in a club context, because I mean, I think we have a lot of freedom in Berlin, but especially when you travel, we go to other places, I think you can experience like just like a different attitude towards like this topic. And of course, I mean, besides this, we also have paramedics, and we need to be prepared to deal with more extreme cases. But in general, I think like this community element is really strong in queer events as well. So I always feel that whenever you go to a queer party in Berlin, you have a community that is taking care of each other, and yeah, and they also like self-regulate in their spaces.
Agreed. I can definitely attest to that. And I think in general, I think there seems to be, or at least in my experience, sometimes there's a lack of understanding of what actually constitutes harassment or abuse. So even from things like locker room talk or like kind of like side sexist jokes or problematic jokes can also kind of feed into this culture. Does anyone have any examples just to kind of raise a little bit more awareness about things people should be looking out for to kind of reduce the mentality or improve the mentalities around this and make spaces feel more inclusive? So looking, for example, at locker room speak, jokes, even from representation in terms of lineups, anything else that people would want people to feel conscious of when wanting to make spaces more inclusive?
Well, for us, it would start with the lyrics of songs with our campaign. I think, it's just really important to recognize how every part of life can have an impact, even just words. And you might not realize when listening to a song, but there are actually studies that show that youth who listen to a lot of songs that include violent lyrics, they actually adopt these views and they show more racist or anti-Semitic or sexist views in real life. So I think that's where it starts, personally.
For me, I would like to see a point where mainstream clubs and festivals are safer spaces as well, because I think queer parties and queer festivals are quite safe, but whenever we leave this bubble and we are out of our community, we experience a lot of homophobia, a lot of sexism, transphobia. So I think that, we have to reach a point that we're creating a wider cultural impact that is not only focused on our own community, but it's going beyond this.
Why do you feel like queer spaces, because it's something also I've noticed as well, particularly from clubbing across the spectrum of very, for lack of a better word, bro-y events to kind of like the intersectional, the queer, the diverse in terms of POC, and I've always noticed the difference. What do you think makes these kind of community spaces more safer in comparison to some of the bigger events we've seen?
I think that's a good question. I think queer people, we are often rejected by our own families, and whenever we go to nightlife and we find this community, we get really excited about it, because for many, including myself, it's the first time that we can be ourselves. We are in a space that is free from judgment, and it's a very liberating experience. I think, I can relate to this, and I think, it really changed my life completely, and that's why it becomes one of my main communities. It's it goes beyond the distraction. It's really like a chosen family.
Agreed. And I think one of the other things that kind of intersects both more underground and marginalized communities, but also the kind of broader industry, is this discussion, I mentioned it earlier, of cancel culture and how effective canceling and having conversations or having constructive conversations or conversations that can reach no conclusion, because obviously some things don't need to be concluded, they need to be dealt with. It's kind of a controversial question, but I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks about the effectiveness of cancel culture in making sure that there are consequences for people's actions, and whether you think it's an effective tool.
I don't like the word cancel. It ends up making perpetrators become victims. So we have to try and rephrase it. We talked about words a lot, so it's super important that we start rephrasing what cancel culture is. And I do believe there should be some consequences, and with certain artists that have been called out, and then they don't get to play or no one wants to book them. That's pretty valid, because if there's a health and safety issue around artists and what they potentially could do if you have female employers, then it is a given that you wouldn't want to book them and then be in the club. But should there be a period of time where they kind of can change them, their behaviour? I believe in change. I do believe people can change and get the help that they need. Obviously, serial rapists and narcissists, they might be beyond that, and then obviously that's going to be a little bit harder to really figure out whether they can come back and can you book them and is there remorse. We haven't had we have had a few artists that have stood up and apologised and have actually said, I know where I messed up. A lot of them put blame onto drugs, but you know, as a recovering drug addict myself, I know that you can own your shit, but you know, there is still consequences to your actions. You're still responsible for your choices. So you can't blame, like you can't really fully go there with the blame. So yeah, I think if we rephrase what cancel culture actually means and what it is, then I think we've probably got a better way of changing, because what happens with cancel culture is that I think people then don't want to talk out even more. It stops people from talking out more because, you know, I'm not saying like, you know, the survivors of the crimes that are happening. It's more of the people around them, you know, people, how do I phrase it? Like, you know, it's the managers, the artists, the agents, the people that see things but don't want to speak in case maybe they get it wrong and then that's going to ruin somebody's career. And that's what we've been up against, really. So yeah, if we can find a new phrase for cancel culture, like reform culture or something, I don't know, reformation.
Yeah, I think there's and this is where I've seen some of the nuance happening, where there's cancel culture which kind of like enables or kind of suggests that people are cancelled for life, and in some cases people deserve to be, in my opinion. But there's also certain conversations where, even particularly within certain communities, I've seen where people make mistakes, and this is not in the context of Metoo now, but there is space allowed for education and learning to grow. So whether that's conversations around, okay, what you said is not okay, and that feeds into something more toxic and potentially perpetuating kind of things like rape culture and hypersexualization and derogatory perspectives of women and other gender minorities. I think there should be at least some sort of framework to say, okay, this is, even though I know you're scared of what may happen because of what you said, this is what the consequences of that are. And I think actually what you mentioned before about really making consequences clear about it and how that also feeds into cancel culture is also super important. Are there any other thoughts or
No, but I think this goes like for artists, that like artists that acting, doing this kind of stuff. But there is also, this also could be as an agent, to be aware, where also me, I have a lot of women also in my agency, DJ, and I want to be sure where are they playing on the weekend. I want to be sure which promoter I'm working with, which club I'm working with, to be sure they are not sent like across Europe or across the world alone, and not knowing the people we are working with. So I think this also starts from this point to be sure who you are working with, like generally to make sure it's like it's the safest as possible for everyone.
Agreed. Any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, any movement that clearly takes a stance against racism, sexism, ableism, honestly, I'm all for it. It's maybe controversial and maybe cancel culture is not the perfect term for it, but I think it's really important to take clear stances like that against things that are unacceptable. And I think it also shows effects in real life, like with Deutsch Rap Me Too, which we spoke about earlier. In light of that whole movement online, one rapper, Nemo, he actually withdrew the release of a song in which he included a lyric stating, I'm rephrasing, something like, I will rape her until she's almost dead. In light of that hashtag just blowing up, he withdrew the release of that song, and I think that's part of cancel culture, and I think that's a great part of it. So honestly, I'm pretty much all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Rebekah. I think, like, I personally don't like the term cancel culture. I think that it becomes too toxic. I think it also, like, it isolates people, it silences them instead of, like, teaching them how they can improve and do better. Of course, it's very important to call people out and point out when they're wrong, especially for some extreme cases. But also, I think I maybe prefer the term of, like, community accountability, because we believe that the only way that we can move forward is this when we call each other, but we can learn from each other, and then, we move forward. I think instead of just like punishing someone forever and canceling the person for life, I think there has to be space for improvement and for growth.
So maybe you just want to recap, because we've obviously been around a lot, and maybe just before we get into questions from the audience. So we've heard about both proactive and reactive measures to make spaces safe. So having communities together, but not only just on a party-goer basis, but also in an artist agency relationships, also with venues, to kind of make sure that you know who you're working with and you're holding people accountable, making sure that you have tools in spaces, for example, awareness teams, policies, clear communication with events goers, also the perspectives of potentially having independent industry bodies that kind of oversee our industry and help with the regulation and conversations. These are all tools that we've just discussed. Also using platforms such as online campaigns to raise awareness and education so people understand what the boundaries are. So just as a summary, I wanted to allow some time for conversations or questions from the audience, or I think there may have been some questions online.
I have a question online, so I can read it out loud. Esteemed audience and representative of the audience right now. So I'm reading a question of Anne, and it is: a common problem in multiple industries, including the music industry, is abuse from a teacher or someone who has a higher position toward a student. This happens, power play, so to speak. This happens in conservatories, art academies, sports, etc., etc. A big problem here is that the student is often not feeling like they are in a position to say something, in fear of not getting certain opportunities or grades. Do you see ways to fix this problem, which is not very often visible?
Any thoughts on this?
I think what I would like to see is that the big artists that have the power, that aren't abusing their positions, start talking out about this, start using their power for good to raise more awareness, to speak out against their peers when they see it happening. Like we talked about what basically it's turning bystanders into upstanders, and that's generally what's really going to be ahead of us as an industry. And then I think it will be more like a counterculture of turning, these powerful people into people that you look up to but respect, and then they respect their followers, and then I don't know, it's like an example thing. I think we need better peers, basically. I need better peers, or, people need to look up to better role models. And, like in the discussion there, it's like we, as an industry, we would rather abuse the 19 or 18-year-old victim rather than question the 40-year-old or 40-year-old plus perpetrator's behaviour, and we need to flip that around. So we need to create a safer space for people to come out and speak out and show there's no consequences. I've spoken out about my stuff, and up until now there's been not really many consequences, and I'd hope more women feel empowered to do the same, and then slowly we can make change.
And I think also tied into that is building structures where people feel that they can report, because I think, for example, whether it's an independent reporting tool in an agency or in a music school or in a workplace working in music technology, sometimes people don't always feel able to have conversations on a one-on-one basis, and maybe there's a way for people to providing spaces, for example, even if it's like an awareness team that people can come and talk to, where they know that they've been trained, they feel safe, and they know that something will come of it. I think sometimes that actually is what stops also people speaking out, the fear of a lack of consequence, which is unfortunately far too often happening in these cases. So I think on an institutional level, building structures where people can report and feel safe to report, whether that's a piece of technology like a reporting app or an actual person, definitely helps. And unfortunately, I guess the individual cases are too often and not often looked in more depth. So I think that also comes back to one of the key themes that we've discussed, which is community, making sure that there are people there for each other, and enabling and helping people to feel supported and strong in their experiences and what they survived.
The questions are keeping coming up, so I'm going on with them. We have two that I would like to take, so if you can make a short round. How can we change the old boys network, often covering up abuse in favor of a perpetuator? As a female DJ myself, I find that speaking out does more harm to my career than just keeping quiet. Who would like to take that one? How can we change the old boys network?
No, I think there is already like a change is happening for the last few years. I'm in this industry since more than 12 years. And when I started, there was almost only, like talking about headliner, like the biggest DJ, it was almost only male DJ. There was a very few women DJ having this position. And I think everyone like has noticed like throughout the last 5, 6 last years, this has already started to change. It's like, and also you can see also like on the biggest festivals or even like a normal club show or lineups that people are trying more and more to have like a 50-50 equality between male and female DJ. I don't really like this term, but it's like what it is. And I think this is also helping then to have a better balance between them and have like better situation.
Agreed. And maybe just to quickly shortly add, sorry. I think that also taking space and holding space and creating space is the main ways. So I know, for example, through all my intersections of marginalization, whether it be through race, through gender, through sexuality, whatnot, there's been obviously struggles in making those spaces more diverse. But what I've seen is an increase in grassroots-led organizations, of collectives, of people coming together to force people to question, okay, so you want to use us for a campaign to look diverse, but what does it look like behind the scenes? Like, what policies do you have in place to make all of us feel safe? So I think ensuring if you're in positions of power, that you are asking the right questions about what policies people have in place, why is a room only full of a particular demographic of person? Then you're at least sparking conversations to make sure that people are aware of this. Because I think, as you said at the very beginning, a lot of it is down to not understanding what the issue is at the very beginning. So, yeah. Would anyone else like to add anything?
No. Unfortunately, it is 1 minute before the end.
Okay.
But I would like to take, if everybody is okay with it, I would like to take 2 minutes from the break for the very important question of the chat, which you probably read, maybe even 3 minutes. And we'll make a shorter break if the tech team agrees with me. It's a very important question. So I would like you to, all of you, including you, dear moderator, if I may take the last round for us here, to answer briefly the question with yes or no, and making 1 or 2 sentences why. Make it very short. I want to hear really everybody. And the question is, do you think it is possible to separate the artist and the music, with the example Manson and many others? I know it's difficult, but can you try to share your opinions with everybody? That would be great. Who would like to start?
For me personally, it's a no, because music, when I listen to it, creates a memory or something. I want to revere the artist. If I listen to an R. Kelly track now, like, I just think of all of his victims or survivors, so I can't separate that. And then if you listen to the lyrics and you know the backstory, then obviously it's just not for me, no. Basically.
Thank you very much. Pierre?
So for me, it's also a no. I mean, like, if you're really like a music lover, you're also like in love with the people, not in love with the people, but you're also like, the people who's doing the music is as important as the music. And if you're really following like the musician, I don't think you can make it, like, you can separate both of them. So for me, it's also a not.
Thank you.
For me, it's also a no. It's something that I've definitely had conversations with, particularly in the wake of what can be seen, maybe the demise or the confusing role of wherever Kanye West has gone. I used to be a massive Kanye West fan. He said some horrific things in the past, and I've had to reconcile with the fact that actually, as you said, the art that the person has created is influenced by their life. So the art is a product of the artist. And yeah, it's unfortunate because or it's not unfortunate, but you have to kind of reconcile with letting go of maybe pieces of art that inspired you because they were created by a person that isn't worthy of your time.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, please?
Yeah, I agree with the others. For me, it's also definitely a no. I think you can't really separate the work from the artist. Every work created is very personal. And yeah, so also no.
Okay.
I will agree. It's also no from me. I'm not a musician as the rest of you, but from my very subjective point of view, I would agree. Yeah, it's hard to separate.
Okay, so I can't remember who asked the question, but in any case, it's a very clear answer. Who is for no in this audience? Can we separate yes, or can we not separate no? So who is for yes? 1, 2. Who is for no? Okay, vast majority of everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you to have given me the time for the last question.
Of course.
I let you close it yourself.
Cool. So yeah, I just want to take the time to thank all of the panelists that joined today's conversation. I think there were some really key action points. I hope it's been useful for the audience in understanding at least some very basic tools that you can work towards and things we can do together to make this industry a much safer place and kind of stamp out sexual harassment and exploitation for good. Yeah, thank you to Rebekah, thank you to Chris, thank you to Lina, and thank you to Pierre. And yeah, thank you to everyone for listening, and enjoy the rest of the festival.